welcome to another episode of the More Than the Game podcast. My name is Dan Walls, and it's a pleasure to bring you these interviews and these chats every now and then. And if this is your first time listening, we hope you enjoy today's podcast, today's interview. If you're returning, thanks again for watching this or listening to this podcast. We really appreciate the support. Well, with me today, I have a very special guest once again. They're all special guests in my eyes. But today we have a man who's a successful sportsman. He hasn't so much played in the NBL or been an administrator or anything like that. But he is an avid basketball fan, and he's won a championship or premiership with the St. George Illawarra Dragons in the NRL. He's got a load of great information and insight to provide us with today. And I'm speaking about Jamie Soward. Jamie Soward, welcome to the More Than a Game podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Very excited. I love the fact that you said championship because being a huge American sports fan, as you can see, it is a championship to me. It's not a premiership.
There you go. So, mate, you have got the Boston singlet on and you're a massive Kings fan. We are breaking the rules slightly. This podcast has been about basketball, but you are passionate about it, and that's why I got you on. So where did that passion originally come from?
I played basketball my whole junior. I loved it, and I sort of had a decision to make around 12, 13, whether I was going to be attempt to be a basketballer or play rugby league, and probably my height really made that decision for me. But my mum was a fantastic basketballer in a state league system for the Wagga Blaze. She won a championship with them, and my stepdad was a very good basketball for the Wagga Heat as well. So the basketball love has always been in and around me from when I was a young man, or young kid, from 10. But the footy side of things was dad. So the basketball love really came when I met my stepdad. He introduced me to the Boston Celtics, which is obviously my team, and a guy called Larry Bird, who I just became infatuated with, and really, just admired all that kind of stuff. So basketball has always been around my family. I loved watching mum play. She was really, really good. So, her twin sister, they played together. She played for the Capitals. So, Marlene Leonard played for the Capitals. So, but mum, watching my mum excel like that, because my dad was always a rough and tumble footballer and stuff, but going and watching mum, who the no look pass and shooting and stuff like that, like she I think I carried some of that into my footy. But basketball's always been in my blood, and I love watching it now, but I love playing it as well. Yes,
there you go, mate. Basketball's in the blood. Didn't realise that. So you told me just before we started the podcast off air, if you will, that you got Paul Pierce's autograph tattooed on your backside. How did that come about?
I'm a diehard Celtics fan. For anyone that follows me on social media, I got the chance to interview Paul through the NRL last year, and he came out and did a tour with Jonathan Thurston, a Legends tour, and they'd surprised me by letting me go to interview Paul. And I had actually travelled with my best mate over to see his jersey retirement in Boston. So we saw his number get raised to the banners, and we're both in tears and couldn't believe that we were there for that moment, because we're big Celtics fans. But I got the chance to meet Paul and got a couple of signatures, obviously. And then, my mate raced up and said, because we've already got the Boston postcode inside a little clover as well. And my mate said we should get him to sign just above our butt and get it tattooed. So we both got it signed, and asking Paul Pierce to sign your rear end isn't the most attractive thing, but he did it. And then I raced off to a local tattoo parlour and got it inked in. So it's there forever now. He just wrote Paul Pierce 34, and it was like those moments. I've actually signed someone before and been tattooed. That person's tattooed my signature onto them. So it was pretty cool to still have that fandom. And it's something that I'm glad I haven't lost in retirement, is that whole fandom. Like, you speak about the Kings, like going and talking to Andrew Bogut and Casper Ware and all those guys, and even talking to the owners, Paul Smith, and hanging around those guys. That for me is a huge deal. I don't think they realise how giddy I am when I talk to those guys. So, to get Paul Pierce, his signature, it was just a little bit of fun, and happy I got it.
And you proposed on half court in Boston as well, I hear.
Yeah, it doesn't stop there, yeah. So, I got figured out a way. I just scammed them away, really, pretty much. I just kept hounding Boston, the Celtics organisation, to try and get a photo, which is what we're trying to do. And then I actually had to propose over here, so the ring was insured. So we did it here first. And then when I went to TD Garden, the lady was Australian, and she said, "Oh, we're going to take you down to centre court so you can propose." So my wife, or my fiance at the time, had to take the ring off, and we had to come up with a plan of how this was going to go down. So we're walking in there, and I'm getting excited because I'm in TD Gardens the first time. I just can't believe, I'm here. And, my wife is trying to tell me to calm down and how we're going to do this. And I said, I'll just point to where Larry's number is in the rafters, and you turn around, and then I'll get on one knee. And then, it happened. So,
Right.
it's the best photo because Maddie had never watched a basketball game before we met, and I took her to the Kings when they played at the old aquatic centre.
Oh, right,
And once that happened, she became obsessed with the Kings and obviously the Celtics. There's no other team in my house. So
there you go. It's great, mate. Yeah, you mentioned the Kings. I've in my role with the NBL, I've seen you there quite a bit and bumped into you a few times. And you've obviously been involved, as you said, but one of the key things that you were involved in was the Celebrity All-Star game and getting that up and running last season. And I was there for that game on centre court watching that, and it was just a great game. Great to see so many celebrities and ex-sportsmen and women playing in that game. How did that come about to get that up and running?
I'd been pretty interested in doing something for a charity in retirement for a long time, and the opportunity had sort of passed me by a couple of times with the Kings. I'd talked to them a little bit, but probably just never got off the ground. And once I floated the idea to Paul and his team, and Whitey and his team, they sort of loved the idea that a person that they wanted to be associated with wanted to do a charity game. So I just got a couple of guys who I sort of knew could help pump it up, and I was going to get there. Nick Davis was pretty good in helping me come up with the list. And then obviously, when you get a guy like Anthony Mundine, I pretty much picked up the phone and said, "Chock, do you want to play in this charity game?" And he said, "Yeah, brah, I'll be there." So it was really, really well put together. It was a lot of work, a lot of hard work behind the scenes by the King's support staff, and it was a great day for the Starlight Foundation because Paul ended up putting $100 per point, so it was an extra $4,000 in the kitty.
Right.
By the time that sort of happened, but it was just sort of. If we look at the American style of doing things, the pre-game entertainment, I thought, there's an opportunity there once a year to have something special for the fans to come in and watch. They see all the football stars on the sideline, Josh Dugan, Adam Reynolds, Marty Tapau, all these kind of guys. Latrell Mitchell's been there. Yep. If you can get those guys involved in a charity game and raise some money as well, that was the main thing. Raise a lot of money, but just go out there and probably realise how easy the professionals do it and how hard it is for us. But hopefully it's an ongoing thing. And I know with COVID it's obviously a little bit harder and we don't know what's going to happen with the NBL. But I just wanted to pin my hat on something there and have a relationship with the Kings and try and repay them back for them looking after me and my family.
Yeah, that's great, mate. And let's hope it does continue because it was a great concept and it was great to see Chock out there and doing his thing. He's an amazing athlete, that's for sure. Well, speaking of Chock, who you also played for the Dragons, you did play for the Dragons. Most of your games in the NRL were for the Dragons. And so we'll dive into your career now. But as I was a sportsman back in the day as well. And for myself, as a reflect of my time playing basketball, I learned a lot of life lessons. Life is more than sport. But I learned a lot about life that I've been able to apply to my workplace and my marriage, all that sort of thing from playing sport. One of the key things I learned that I've identified in you as a player and as an athlete is hard work. And you look at a lot of the players in the NRL or the NBL, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of athletes that you look at and they just don't have to put the hard work in. They're just gifted athletes, like you played against them. Your Greg Inglis's, your Jared Haynes, all those sort of guys. It seem like it's seamless for them. Not saying they don't put in hard work, but there's players that don't need to. But for me, as I reflected on your career from afar, you are someone who very much applied yourself, I believe. And, amazing player. Obviously a Dragons fan, so I loved watching you play. But for me, yeah, you just look like you applied yourself and hard work was very important to you. Would that be a fair comment to make?
Yeah, it's spot on. And you talk about life lessons and stuff like that. I was pretty talented as a kid, skill wise, within my age group, growing up and playing footy in Wagga. But I wasn't big, so I sort of had to work out other ways to get around the field and come up with different kinds of plays. And there was 3 or 4 other guys that should have made it that were more athletically gifted and probably more skillful than me. But I just wanted it. I just wanted it bad. And I'd like to say that drive and motivation and training and perfecting of your craft lasts through your whole career, but it didn't for me. Once I sort of reached that pinnacle, I guess, in 2011 and lost Wayne's guidance and that sort of hunger, I wasn't a great trainer. I'd worked hard to get to where I had, and I'd still worked hard and worked on my body, but I wasn't a fantastic trainer after I left the Dragons. So my body started to fall apart and all that kind of stuff. So, it's sort of looking back, I'd worked so hard to get my body into shape so many times year after year. And I probably took that for granted later on in my career. And now that I'm retired, I realise how hard it is to get back into shape and look after yourself. So, but you're right, there's so many lessons. I love the fact that you brought that up pretty early in the pod. But the sport is, for me, when I first started, I wanted it so bad, and that's what drove me to be able to get to that level. But there's along the way, I lost about a vision of how to live life and enjoy life, and it became all about sport. And not until I met my wife, my second wife, Maddie, after a pretty tumultuous time through divorce and emotional kind of stuff, that I'd realised how much I'd actually missed out on life and what actually goes into being a person that can enjoy life. And I understand it's a results-driven business, as you would know, working in the NBL and playing sport yourself. You judge them whether you win or lose. But if you ever lose the sight of life, that's when you can start to spiral. And I went through all that. So, the life lessons and how hard I'd worked didn't carry through my whole career, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned about, I guess, moving into retirement. Something I've spoken about in this podcast previously is plays and life beyond sport, life beyond the NBL, NRL, whatever the case may be. I guess for so long of your life, you've got that purpose and you're driven by success and championships. You've got that structure and routine throughout the week. But when you leave and when you retire, something I've spoken to Jason Smith about, the former Kings captain, the importance of having a sense of purpose and vision outside of sport is huge. And you see a lot of players go through depression and struggle once they've retired. So what have you put in place to ensure that hasn't been the case for you?
Well, I went through it while I was playing. In 2015, I'd split up. I was dealing with a divorce, anxiety, depression, all that kind of stuff, but still putting on a brave face to go out and play every weekend. That was my outlet, was getting out of the house to play. So I'd sort of dealt with that. When I retired, I was over in England. I was playing over there and debating whether I wanted to spend another year over there and try and get into a club and just continue to play or to come home. And one of my great mates, I've been pretty lucky my whole life. I've had a really tight circle of mates that have never bullshitted to me and always told me how it was. And he said, "How's it going over there?" And I said, "Yeah, it's okay." He said, "What are you going to do next year?" I said, "I don't know. Maybe I should retire." And he just said, "If you're thinking about it, you just do it. Like, there's no, you can't half-ass what you're doing because you're going to get injured." So after my last game, I didn't hang around. I got on a plane probably about 2 hours later, came home. And then, a week after sort of catching up with my family and my missus, I woke up one morning and retired. And it was like a huge emotion for me because I just started crying. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I've got a keen interest in media, and I feel like I've got a little niche there to be able to do something, being able to cover both sports or all sports, as you may have seen. But I didn't really know what to do. And for the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I sort of just sat around and became not depressed because I had Maddie and I had that person to talk to, but my life just seemed like I just needed to slow down and, just put some goals down. So I wanted to work in media. So how was I going to get into the media was actually getting a job to start off with. And I ended up selling toilets and taps and stuff out at Harvey Norman, Penrith. And my missus got me the job because she works at head office. And it was the best thing I ever did. Like, if I'm being totally honest, did I enjoy it? No, not at all, because I know nothing about toilets. But in terms of getting out and dealing with a lot of that stuff that I dealt with, not wanting to talk to people while I was playing. As soon as I finished training, going home because I didn't want to be caught in a conversation that made me feel uncomfortable or be seen or be bagged and all that kind of stuff. So I actually really enjoyed it for the year. And as soon as I started getting myself into a rhythm and routine, which is what you crave as an athlete, when you retire, you crave that routine. And once I started working, I got into a bit of routine. I started enjoying going to work, and then the offers started coming in for the media roles. So it was sort of like to get the ball rolling. I needed to go through something that was going to make me uncomfortable and take me out of that comfort zone of what I've been in for 12 years, and then get back to the goals that I'd set out for myself, which was to be successful in the media. And I'd like to be able to tell that person 3-4 years ago when I retired that it's going to be okay, but you just need to work hard on yourself, because after I retired, my body was shot. Like I would struggle to get out of bed because, you go from training every day, putting up with pain, getting everything you can to get ready to play. When you don't have to play, mentally your brain says, this is great. Like, I don't have to stress about this. And that's why people say, do you miss playing? And I don't, because I don't miss not sleeping for 24 hours after I play, and nervous about if I'm in good form, like all this kind of stuff that goes into it. And when you retire, your body just slows down and you're slow thinking. And I see life in the game now of life and all that kind of stuff. And when I watch basketball and footy and whatever, I see it so much clearly than I ever saw it when I was playing. And it's something that I enjoy and something that I feel like I can pass on to younger guys or younger people, really, in the profession, if they get into professional sport.
Yeah, that's fantastic, mate. Just before I dive into your media, which I had here, just want to touch on the anxiety, depression, because I struggle with it myself. And there's no doubt, because it's so prevalent these days, there's no doubt someone watching or listening now to the podcast who's going through it themselves. And it is tough. It's full on, and particularly in the season of life we're in with COVID, it can be so overwhelming. Is there any strategies that you put in place previously just to work through it, to move through it? You mentioned having mates and people around you. It's so important, particularly for men, I think. Men just don't talk about their issues enough, which we need to, because we're wired for a relationship, I believe, and we need that. So was there anything in your life that you put in place to ensure that you mentioned routine was one of those things? Anything else that you put in place?
I was very lucky that I met Maddie at the time I did, in the crossroads of my life. And I remember the first time she brought her dog over and she said, should we go for a walk? I'd never gone for a walk by myself.
Wow.
And it was a real eye-opener to like, you can actually leave your house and put your headphones in and go for a walk and just, and get some fresh air. So that became a real part of our routine was walking. And sometimes when I was looking after the dog, when she wasn't there, I'd just take her for a walk because I felt safe in that area. And I think dealing with that kind of stuff is obviously people are being more aware of it, but also talking about it for me became a real I seek some help while I was playing and talk to someone about my issues and what had gone on and stuff like that. That became a real outlet for me, and you could feel the life start to shift after that. Like it was like a chapter closing on some of that other stuff, but opening a new chapter and opening my views and how I was going to see the rest of my life in a different way. So I remember one time dealing with anxiety, and I still do in certain situations because social media is everywhere, and you go out into public settings, and I like a beer, I like having a punt. I've gambled too much at some stages in my life. I've drank too much at certain stages in my life. I've got a balance now, but I've been out in situations where I felt really uncomfortable and got into heated, because I felt like they were just trying to make me their story. You know, they were trying to, and that's the anxiety and the paranoia that goes with being in the public eye. So I went to the mall once. I went down to get a shirt and a pair of jeans. I went and bought a juice first, and I heard someone start sort of yelling out at me and start saying something. I ended up buying a pair of pajamas and a pair of sunglasses. I didn't need any of those two things, but they were the most quiet stores around me, and I felt like that I had to escape what was going on around me. And looking back now, it's funny that that had happened, but at the time I was really like shaking, and I'd walked out and spent a couple $100 in sunnies that I didn't need, and just because I wanted to escape what was going on. So dealing with it, I think it's important to slow down and take a breath and realize you can live in that moment, and you can walk away, you can go and get a glass of water, but if you slow everything right down, pretty much like anything in life, if you slow it right down and break it down to that moment and worry about the process and not the result of what's going on, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah, 100%. Well said, mate. I think just touching on that, finally, one thing I've learned from my experiences is that going through it, we're so wide in society, I guess, to run away from hardship and suffering. And I learned through my experiences, no, you need to embrace it. You need to embrace the moment, as you said. And it comes back to your sporting career as well, but also another life application point. I think that, when teams are going bad or your team's not going that great and you are in the public eye, I guess, I think there's this tendency to just want to run away from it. But I think wisdom says embrace it, learn from it. How do you grow in that situation? So just reflecting on your sporting career and that concept, is that something that you feel has been helpful in your career? Just embracing the moment, as you said, and trying to learn and grow from it.
I think I have learnt to embrace it in retirement more than what I did as a player. When you start to work in the public eye, everyone's going to have an opinion, and I use that to fuel me at a lot of my career because I was an emotional player. If I was going well, I sort of looked for that article or person that didn't think I was going well and tried to get that to drive me. And at sometimes in my career, that was to my detriment because it took my focus away from the job I was actually doing. But once I started to get into the media and retirement, I had to make a decision that, not everyone's going to like you, but, it's a matter of having your opinion. And if you've done the research and you believe in your opinion, then you start to embrace the comments, because people are going to be personal. People are going to be racist, all that kind of stuff. Like, we're never, ever going to stop that, which is really, really sad. But the people that I enjoy talking to, that I embrace, this sort of back and forth banter with, I think by the end of it, they actually end up respecting you because you can have those conversations and you do embrace it without sort of taking yourself too seriously. And there's times where I'm, not my friendliest, and I sort of swat them away pretty harshly. But there's other times where I'm really engaging as well, and that's about embracing, the situation and what's going on. And if you believe what you've said and you stand up for it, then there's no reason to not embrace it. And I think that's the same as what you're talking about when you're playing. You're gonna have bad games. It's just, that's life. No one has ever played perfect their whole career. People have bad games and people have bad stretches in life. But if you embrace that and work out how you can sort of get around that and come back stronger from that, you're going to be better off for it.
Yeah, 100%. That's great, mate. Just with the media too, the media career. One thing I was talking to Matt Russell, the NRL, NBL commentator previously, and we talked about adaptability in journalism and sports reporting. And as you've retired, I've very much seen that. You haven't been one-dimensional in pursuing the NRL media, but you have ventured into NBL and general sports, be on Bill and Boz and these sort of shows. So what does adaptability mean to you, and how important is it to be adaptable, particularly in the season of life we're in? I think companies, governments, they need to adapt to the situation, and if we are going to survive and move through this thing. So, how important is that in your life?
Yeah, I love all sports. I think it's a real bow, to my string to my bow, I beg your pardon, to be able to cover and talk about that without, I guess, faking it till you make it in a sort of sense. I can I feel like I've got a pretty nice grasp on things in the NBL that I could actually break down some play and stuff like that, and I enjoy that. Obviously, footy's there, but I'd sort of relate it back to when I first came to Sydney. I wasn't a goal kicker, and my stepdad, Huey, just said, if you get in a situation where there's two halfbacks and he's just as good as you and you can goal kick, then you're going to be able to get that job. So the adaptability to be able to cover many a sport, and that's why I enjoyed Bill and Boz, and that's why I'd like to think that's why I keep getting invited back to the back page. Is it's an hour of sport, and you've got to know your stuff without sort of being so strong in one area that they can't go to you on another. So I enjoy that whole kind of thing. I enjoy the prep. It keeps me fresh, being able to look at other sports. And if you look at all the best people that cover the game in America on ESPN, Stephen A. Smith, Wilbon, all these kind of guys, they are so adaptable across. They've got the major sports, but they are so adaptable and so they get it. So a lot of that stuff is based off what I've seen from those guys, what I like, the podcasts I listen to, and you pick up those opinions pretty quickly, and you can put your own spin on it without just saying word for word what they said. So I enjoy the adaptability of being able to showcase my skills. I've done some commentary, I've done some play-by-play. I wanted to do some sideline stuff for the NBL. That opportunity hopefully comes one day. I enjoy being able to showcase my talent and my skill because I work really hard at it. But it also, I understand that it takes time, and not everyone wants to see an ex-NRL player covering the basketball and stuff like that. But hopefully one day, we get to a point where we're actually listening to what the person's saying and not worried about who the person actually is. Yeah, for sure, mate. No, I'm for one, would love to see you on the sidelines. So you can, if you got my vote. I'd be pretty short standing next to the Yeah, that's true. If he's back, let's hope he is. Yeah. Let's shift now into successful organisations, because you've been a part of a few. And when we talk about the NBL, the current champions, the Perth Wildcats, most successful sporting team in Australia, arguably, because they've made the finals just about every year since their inception. So, and won so many championships. But they're going to give it a good hard crack this upcoming season. But you've been a part of the Roosters setup. You've been a part of the Dragons when they won the premiership and had success there. And then Penrith, I guess, when Gus was there as well, and Bill Gould trying to build a successful organisation. So what is it about these organisations like your Melbourne Storms, your Perth Wildcats, your Sydney Roosters that they can just have success for so long? Is it a matter of getting the right people on board, or is it more to it than just the people in the organisation? Yeah, it's if you look at the three clubs that I played with in the NRL, the Roosters were coming off 3 grand finals, and then they had a huge roster turnover. Brad Fittler retired then to 2004. We'd had some successful lower grades, so that transition was starting to happen, and the best teams make that happen, but you've also got to have the right people and right players at the right time. So that was a really hard transition for the Roosters. I don't think they I think they finished last in 2009 and then made a grand final in 2010. The Dragons had come off a successful period, but just needed a change at the helm, which is what Wayne happened, and then we became really successful. So that, again, wasn't necessarily a player thing. That was more a coach-driven thing. So for the Roosters was more like we need to get some different players in to be able to carry on that legacy. The Dragons had some good players. They needed a different voice at the top. And then Penrith was starting out. When I went to Penrith, Gus had signed me for 4 years, and he just said there's a vision here to try and get these young guys through. And, I probably knew in the back of my head that I wasn't going to play at that contract because there was going to be so many young guys coming through. But to be there at the start of that, and, you think 2014, we're one play away from a grand final. That was the start of what is now in 2020 the hottest team in the NRL. So successful organisations always, they have people that I think about the Roosters right now in the NRL. Nick Politis, they have board members that do board member stuff. They have the coaches that coach and the players that play. And that is never defined anymore by 1, 2, and 3. That never gets blurred. You look at the Brisbane Broncos at the moment who are struggling. They're just so far distanced and separated that you don't know who's doing what, and you don't know what their direction is. So I think being clear-cut, having a direction that everyone believes in, allowing the players to play, the coaches coach, and the administrators administrate, goes into being a successful organisation. Yeah, well put, mate. That's so true. And you mentioned the coaches.
it's important to have a successful coach. So from successful organisations to successful coaches, you were obviously coached by Wayne Bennett, and you could probably say the NBL equivalent is Brian Goorjian, who's back for this upcoming season. A phenomenal coach and a great guy. First of all, what makes a good coach in your opinion? Because you've been under quite a few. And when you reflect on those two guys, Brian Goorjian and Wayne Bennett, for both of them, the rap on them is they're such great man managers, and they're great mentors. So they're not just about the X's and O's. They have a good rapport with the playing group as well. So yeah, what else makes a great coach at NBL, NRL level? I think it goes across all sports.
Yeah, I think the longevity of the great man managers is probably what stands out to those two guys. You know, Brian Goorjian obviously was successful in what he did in winning championships, but you need to be able to keep hitting the refresh button on those longevity in the teams. Like you think about what he did with that Kings team, like they were very talented, but you know, how do you keep getting the best out of those guys, which is what Trent Robinson's doing at the Roosters, and what Wayne's been able to do year after year is get the best out of his guys each week enough to be able to be successful throughout the season. So I think that, you know, I've been a part of my coaches. I think 4 or 5 of my coaches throughout my career have all won premierships. So there's a lot that goes into it, but it's that longevity of man management, understanding that not everyone's the same. Not everyone needs a cuddle, and not everyone needs to kick up the arse. And I think that, you know, Brian coming back into the NBL is a huge coup for the NBL and the Illawarra Hawks, and they're going to need...
mate. No longer the Illawarra Hawks.
Oh, sorry, just the Hawks. But yeah, it's I think that yeah, those guys tend to get the best out of their players because their players can trust them, and you know that when you go in the trenches, you know, I think about many a press conference where I didn't play as great, and a question had come up, and Wayne had come out and deflect it, and yeah, you're all in it together. Because as a guy that stressed a lot about that kind of stuff, you know, there was nothing better than knowing that your coach has got your back. So I think that, you know, the Hawks will be looking to get some of the best out of their young guys that have had a tough year last year and gone through some adversity, and get someone in there that doesn't waver. You know, wherever the season's going, they're going to be turning out, working hard, and you know, they know what they get out of their coach.
Absolutely. Just a quick one on Wayne Bennett, because you were part of that 2010 premiership, which we'll come to again. But one thing I noticed on, I think Paul Kemp was talking about it last night on NRL 360. I know it was the Matty Johns podcast, and he was talking about when you guys went into the sheds at halftime when you were down. And you can verify if this is true if you wish. But he was referring to Brian Smith and how Brian Smith in that halftime break was just all over the board, X's and O's. He said confusing the Roosters players, whereas Wayne Bennett just walked around as he does quietly and just apparently said to you, all he said was, when are you guys going to start playing like St. George? Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. He just said that's not the Dragons out there. I don't know who that team is out there, but when you guys play like the Dragons, you're going to be okay, and all we need to do is win the second half. And you know, I didn't hear anything but we need to win the second half, because it happened that quickly and we were losing. So for me, I was like, no shit, we need to win the second half. So yeah, he just had this calmness about him, and there's a documentary coming out later this year, I think about the end of September, that shows the calmness and the vision. And I'd forgotten about that grand final day, the little bits that go behind, because you turn up, you prepare, you turn up, you hopefully win, and then you party, and you know, those little moments that you in the preparation you probably forget about. But his calmness certainly rubbed off, because we'd been in that situation the week before, down at halftime, probably not playing our best, and needed to get back to our A plan, which is what we called it. So after a great start, we'd gone away from that, and you know, his calmness, and it'll show in the documentary, his calmness reflects on the group. And then we come out, and you know, people often say, you know, what was the turning point? I think that first set after halftime, it was a completely different side. When you look at that first set and where we turned the ball over, you know, that was the Dragons that had been dominant all year.
Yeah, as a Dragons fan, I've been following the Dragons for so long. It was such a good feeling, and no doubt to be a part of it. But so obviously every sportsman's dream is that's what you're aiming for the championship, the premiership success. And unfortunately, the Kings missed out on that last season. But being a part of that win in 2010, Yeah, that was your only premiership, wasn't it, from memory? Yeah. What was that like, just to experience that where many other players miss out?
Yeah, it was. I'm still very proud of it to this day. I've worked really hard to get into that position, and the team had gone through so many ups and downs through that little period to get back to that position to be able to perform on the big day. So, winning a ring and being able to show it off, and in retirement, the best part is being able to share it with Dragons fans who were there, or they can see where they watched the grand final and being able to show them the ring. So. That's, to me, that's what you play for. The individual accolades come along with team success, and I was a product of that at the Dragons, and lucky enough to be able to convert that into a premiership. I feel like 2009 we probably weren't ready as a group, and 2011 I felt like we left one on the table because we'd had Origin and struggled, and it ended up costing us towards the back end. So. Yeah, it was. I'm very lucky to get one.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 2011 season. I remember just quickly. I was at the game against the Broncos. That was probably the best game of rugby league I've ever seen. In terms of went to extra time, did it from memory. Golden
and
Lockie's last game. 100%. Gaznier's last game. Lockie's last game. It was phenomenal. But we had a chat about basketball, so let's move down that path a little bit more. But shifting gears a little bit, you are obviously proud of your Indigenous heritage and played for the Indigenous All-Star team and also the 2008 team at the World Cup from memory as well. So I'm very proud of it. The NBL have also done some great things in terms of celebrating Indigenous heritage, and Tyson Demos from the Hawks has been a big part of that. What can the NBL do, I guess, to grow that a bit more maybe? And more broadly, we talk about reconciliation and moving towards, obviously seeing people that every life matter, I guess, particularly Indigenous Australians. So, in your opinion, what can be done to ensure, I guess, that young Indigenous Australians are looking up and having goals and looking forward to life, I guess? So,
yeah, well, I think the first thing is, the way the NRL do it now, you got to start somewhere. 12 years ago, when we played in that game, we had hardly any gear. We didn't have a real design on the jersey. It was very basic. We played in a warm-up match really for the World Cup. So it meant a lot to us, but it wasn't sort of the exposure in and around what it is now in the Indigenous round in the NRL. And we've got so many fantastic Indigenous players, past and present. And you've got so many Polynesians now, past and present, that have paved the way for the product that we see today. So I think the NBL this year, there was a large focus on making everyone included, and that's not just Indigenous Australians. That's making everyone feel a part of this round. And Tyson Demos, to give him a rap, the way he and how hard he worked on getting that exposure and what he's been able to do for Indigenous awareness in basketball in Australia has been fantastic. And looking up to him carry that torch in that sort of sector has been a real bright light, I think, for the NBL, and someone they can continue to work with. And obviously Paddy Mills, the way he's carried himself in the NBA has, I guess, opened a lot of eyes to the Indigenous players in Australia. There's a lot of people that, I get asked all the time, are you Indigenous? And I am, and I'm very proud of it. And, coffee's coffee, no matter how much milk you put in it. I think that there's a lot of people in Australia that don't know the Indigenous players in the NBL, and I think we see that, that how proud that you are. You don't have, the skin color doesn't dictate how proud you are to be where you're from. So I thought the NBL did it fantastic this year. I was proud to be there on the Indigenous round for the Sydney Kings and be a part of that, and the way they did it, and invited Preston Campbell down and to talk about the jersey and all those kinds of things. It's got to start somewhere. I think this is the first year that the NBL, especially the Kings, because we're obviously in Sydney, but they'd recognised the Indigenous heritage and what it means, and to do it, to start somewhere. And this year I felt like was the most aware that the NBL had been in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess as I was saying, Indigenous Australians are so great at sports, so there's a lot to look up to. And for a young Indigenous kid, obviously it gives them something to aspire to, but it's important to have healthy role models, obviously, which you are one. So, I guess how important is it to be in terms of role models, how important is it to be a healthy role model to them?
Yeah, it's a tough one because you know, you say that you're a role model and then you do something wrong and the parents blame you for being a role model.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
I
Not
think
perfect.
as sports people, we're human as well.
That's right.
So in terms of being a role model, I think that your family and where you grow up, that's your role models, and how you conduct yourself and behave later on in life is a reflection of how they raised you or certain things. Because if I'm a role model and I live my life a certain way, and then that person tries to live like me, then they're not actually living in their own moment. So we can do all the school visits that we like, but it's going to come down to that person making the right decisions as a reflection and the consequences of how they've been brought up by their own role models. And
that's right.
Sports stars and sports heroes in America are treated like sports stars and sports heroes. They're not treated like role models because they are not role models. They are guys that earn millions and millions of dollars who carry themselves in a certain fashion to keep the show alive, to keep earning millions and millions of dollars. So they're not necessarily role models. So, I am a role model to my two daughters. I'm a role model to my family. And I think that if everyone actually narrowed that focus down and did that themselves, they'd be able to not blow up if Jamie Soward does something wrong and say that you're a role model. If I come out and say something or I make a mistake or something like that, because you're allowing your child or whatever to be able to lose focus and lose sight on what the actual goal is, and that's being the best person they can be and trying the hardest that they can and having fun and learning lessons along the way.
Yeah, that's great, mate. Well said. 100% agree with you. Just finally, it's been a great chat. Could chat to you about so much more, but you've seen obviously the NBL grow over the last few years, and we've spoken before in this podcast about Larry Kesselman, the great job he's done with his team, and it has really grown to what it is today. But what are you excited for or looking forward to most with the upcoming season?
From a Kings, I'm very biased. So from a Kings point of view, I thought that ownership in Australia is new to Australians in terms of you look at America and the owners get together and they run the league. And I thought, Paul and the way that he conducted himself and was so involved in everything that happened with the Kings last year was a real bright light and real eye-opener for everyone in Australia about what it takes to be an owner, but the pressures and also the exposure we can get to ownership. Like, this is a guy that doesn't have to spend his money on the Kings, can go out and just live life comfortably and enjoy that. But the way he involves himself with the club and wants to be a part of that so much, I thought that opened up the eyes of Australians to how passionate he is about the Kings and basketball in Australia. And I think going forward that we need to understand that the better the product is, which it is, and there's going to be heroes and villains in everything that we do. If we embrace those and pick and choose and make it bigger, then the NBL is going to continue to get bigger and better players. And you saw what LaMelo Ball did by coming down and playing last year. I thought that he was very good in terms of coming down and certainly having some bright light moments. Whether that translates to the NBA or not, I'm not sure, because the NBL is such a good league at the moment, but it's a different style league to the NBA. There's not a lot of zone stuff in the NBA. There's a lot of one-on-one stuff. Down here, I think you can come and cut your teeth in the NBL. And it's, if you're prepared, you can go back and be successful in the NBA. But, I look at a guy like LaMelo who needs that bright lights. I'm not sure Illawarra had the bright lights for him. But certainly the league's growing, the exposure's growing, and it really is the number one sport in the off season of the AFL and basketball. And NRL now. It really dominates that sport. And you can go. The thing I love about basketball is you can go and watch a game in 2 hours and get out. It's not. It's fast paced. I still think 12 minutes would be better. 12-minute quarters. And obviously we're going to see how much the talent pool is there with the new team in Tasmania in the next year or two. But as long as the teams keep getting the quality imports, the game's only going to continue to grow.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Once again, agree. Well, mate, it's been great chatting with you. I really enjoyed the chat, but we'll leave you to it. And thanks for joining us on the More Than the Game podcast. Thanks, brother.
Too easy, mate. Thank you.
Take care.